not a warning shot, not a test. A missile, 23.5 tons, reaching Jerusalem in just 7 minutes. Before the sirens could even finish, before the shelters could fill, it was already there. And this was not the first one. This was wave 54, which means the question is no longer, can Iran reach Jerusalem? The question now is, how many are left? Welcome to the War 2 signal, where the world's most critical conflicts are broken down layer by layer with the seriousness they deserve. Now, if you've been with us for a while, you already know what this channel is, but if you're new here, think of this channel as your trusted briefing desk. No noise, no panic, just the truth analyzed carefully. We have one small request. That subscribe button down there. You know how your doctor keeps telling you, don't wait, do it today, not tomorrow. Same advice. Hit subscribe right now. Don't wait for Wave 79 to find us again. And one more thing, where are you watching this from today? Drop your city, your country right there in the comments, because this story touches every corner of this world. Now let us begin. There are 2 numbers at the center of this story. Not casualty figures, not coordinates, not wave counts. 2 weights, 4 tons and 23.5 tons. Those 2 numbers placed next to each other contain the entire strategic logic of what Iran introduced into this conflict on the 15th of March, and why the Israeli defense establishment has no straightforward answer to what just changed. The first number belongs to the Fateh-2, the hypersonic glide vehicle that Iran had already been deploying in earlier waves of Operation Truthful Promise 4, a missile that travels at Mach 13 to 15, a missile that arrives before the Israeli civil warning system can complete its alert cycle fast enough that by the time sirens trigger and residents begin moving toward shelter, the terminal phase has already begun. The FAT-2's operational value is defined entirely by that speed, 4 tons, moving at velocities that compress every defense timeline to its absolute limit. The second number belongs to the Sejjil-2, 23,600 kilograms at launch, 5 to 6 times heavier than the FHA-2, not fast in the same category, not designed to outrun the intercept window the way a hypersonic glide vehicle does, designed instead for something that requires a different kind of attention. Mass, range and payload capacity that places it in an entirely separate class from anything else Iran had previously committed to this campaign. On the 15th of March, in the 54th wave of Operation Truthful Promise 4, it designated under the operational codename Yazara, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps launched a barrage of missiles toward the occupied territories. Within that barrage, for the first time since this conflict began in late February, the solid-fuel Sejjil-2 was deployed. The operation included the super-heavy KBR Sheshun with double warheads, the EMOD and the K-Bar Kador. But the Sejjil-2 was the weapon that carried strategic weight beyond its warhead. IRGC Aerospace Force Commander Brigadier General Majid Musavi confirmed the launch personally, not through a ministry statement, not through a press release, through a post on his official account. The confirmation was deliberate, the visibility was deliberate. This was not a launch Iran intended to obscure. The impact of Wave 54 was immediate across the occupied territories. Israeli media reported sirens activating in Tel Aviv, Herzliya, and at least 141 other locations simultaneously. 141 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 locations simultaneously. Not a targeted strike, not a precision operation against a single facility, a barrage wide enough, dense enough, and varied enough in its composition to trigger civil defense responses across effectively the entire inhabited geography of the country at the same moment. That number, 141 is the opening data point for understanding what the Sejjil-2's debut actually represented, because the Sejjil-2 is not simply a larger missile, it is a missile with a specific technical architecture, 18 meters in length, while 0.222 T5M in diameter, capable of delivering 700 kilograms to a range of 2,000 kilometers, or 1/2 tons, to targets within 1,000 km. Jerusalem sits well within that second range bracket from Western Iranian launch positions, and Iran says the Sejjil-2 reaches it in approximately 7 minutes. The entire Israeli civil defense architecture, the sirens, the shelter protocols, the public warning system is built around a 90-second response window from the moment of alert to shelter access. 90 seconds assumes the incoming missile was detected early enough to process the trajectory, calculate the impact zone, and issue the warning with sufficient lead time for that 90 seconds to be meaningful. For a missile arriving in 7 minutes from launch, assuming immediate and perfect detection, the total window available to the population is 5 to 6 minutes at best. That is enough time for those already near a shelter. It is very little time for anyone who is not, and it is no time at all if the detection was not immediate, or if the radar picture was not clean, or if the defense system was simultaneously managing other threats arriving from other vectors at the same moment, which in Wave 54 of Operation Truthful Promise 4, it was. There's a question that rarely gets asked in mainstream coverage of Iranian missile strikes, not what was fired, not where it landed, but how much warning did anyone actually have? Because that question is where the Sejjil-2 becomes something fundamentally different from everything that came before it. To understand what the Sejjil-2 represents operationally, one must first understand what Iranian missile systems looked like before it. The older generation, the Shahab series, relied on liquid propellant, and liquid fuel by its very nature is a liability dressed as a weapon. Before a liquid fuel ballistic missile can be launched, it must be fueled. That process, depending on the specific system, takes anywhere from 30 minutes to several hours. During that window, the transporter erector launcher is stationary. It is not moving. It cannot move. The fueling process involves large volumes of highly toxic, highly volatile propellant being loaded into the missile body under pressure. The thermal signatures produced during this process are detectable. The chemical signatures are detectable. American reconnaissance satellites operating in continuous low Earth orbit over the region are specifically calibrated to identify exactly these kinds of pre-launch indicators. What this means in practical terms is straightforward. A liquid fuel missile, before it ever leaves the ground, has already announced itself. It has given the adversary a window, sometimes a significant window, to act, to redirect assets, to attempt a pre-launch strike on the launcher itself. This is not theoretical. This is precisely why the American and Israeli targeting campaign has focused so heavily on Iranian ballistic missile infrastructure, storage facilities, launch complexes, production sites against liquid fuel systems. The pre-launch phase is a vulnerability. The Sejjil-2 eliminates that vulnerability almost entirely. Solid fuel composite propellants are integrated into the missile body during manufacturing. The missile is stored in its launch-ready state. There's no fueling sequence. There's no extended preparation window. There's no thermal bloom from propellant loading for a satellite to detect. There is no chemical signature drifting across the landscape announcing that something is about to happen. The operational sequence for the Sejjil-2 is compressed to its essentials. The transporter erector launcher vehicle drives to a selected launch position. The missile is raised to vertical. It fires. The preparation time from vehicle arrival at launch point to ignition is measured in minutes, not hours. By the time a surveillance asset identifies the launch vehicle, processes the coordinates, passes targeting information through the command chain, and a response can be allocated. In many scenarios, the missile is already airborne, but the solid fuel advantage does not end at the launch phase. The Sejjil-2 is roadmobile. It does not require a fixed launch site. It does not require prepared pad. It can be driven to any location with sufficient open ground and fired from that position. This single characteristic transforms the targeting problem for any adversary attempting to suppress it. Fixed ballistic missile sites can be mapped, monitored, and struck. Road mobile systems exist across a dispersal area that is, in practical terms, too large to comprehensively surveil and too unpredictable to pre-target with confidence. Every road, every valley, every stretch of open terrain within range of a launch corridor becomes a potential firing position. This is what military analysts mean when they describe the Sejjil-2 as survivable, not in the sense that it can absorb a strike, but in the sense that finding it before it fires is structurally difficult in a way that liquid fuel systems simply are not. The combination of these characteristics, solid fuel propulsion, minimal pre-launch signature, road mobility, compressed preparation time, produces a system that does not merely deliver a warhead to its target, it delivers that warhead without providing the adversary a reliable opportunity to prevent the launch. And in a conflict where the Israeli and American campaign has invested significantly in targeting Iranian missile infrastructure before those missiles can be used, that distinction is not technical, it is strategic. The Sejjil-2 was ready on day one. Iran had it. Iran knew what it could do. And yet for 16 consecutive days of this conflict, it did not appear. Not in Wave 1, not in Wave 10, not in Wave 30. The question that serious analysts must sit with is not simply what the Sejjil-2 is. The question is, why did Iran wait? That answer begins not in February of this year, but months earlier in June 2025, during the 12-day war that preceded this conflict. During that operation, Israeli strikes specifically targeted Iranian ballistic missile infrastructure. Production facilities associated with the SEAL program were among them. The strikes were not symbolic. They were designed to do exactly what strategic bombing of industrial capacity is always designed to do: reduce the adversary's ability to replenish what it expends. They succeeded at least partially. What this means is that by the time the current conflict began on the 28th of February, Iran's Sejjil-2 stockpile was not unlimited. Production capacity had been degraded. The missiles remaining in inventory were finite. They could be fired, but they could not be rapidly replaced, and a weapon that cannot be replaced must be rationed. This is the logic that explains the 16-day delay with complete strategic coherence. In the opening waves of a sustained missile campaign, quantity is the operational priority. The objective is saturation, overwhelming the adversary's layered defense architecture with volume, forcing the interception systems to cycle through their interceptor stockpiles faster than those stockpiles can be replenished. For that task, Iran had other weapons: the Fateh-2 hypersonic glide vehicle, the IRGC-2 long-range drone, the Shakan, the EMAD systems available in sufficient numbers to sustain high-tempo operations across dozens of consecutive waves. The Sejjil-2 was not held back because it was unnecessary. It was held back because it was too valuable to spend early. In the language of military resource management, the Sejjil-2 had become a strategic reserve asset, preserved for the moment when its deployment would carry meaning beyond its immediate destructive effect, preserved for the moment when Iran chose to signal something qualitatively different to the Israeli military establishment. The moment arrived at Wave 54, and when it arrived, the manner of its deployment was deliberate in ways that extend beyond the missile itself. The Sejjil-2 was not fired alone. It was fired alongside the Fateh-2, and that pairing is not coincidental, it is doctrinal. The Fateh-2 travels at Mach 13 to 15. It arrives before Israeli warning cycles complete. Its value is speed. It compresses the defense timeline to the point where interception becomes geometrically difficult, regardless of the interceptor's capability. The Sejjil-2 travels slower, but it carries a warhead several times heavier than anything else in the Iranian inventory except the Shakan. Its value is mass. It places demands on the interception system that are entirely different in character from those posed by a hypersonic vehicle. Together they present the Israeli defense architecture with two simultaneous problems that exploit two entirely different limitations in the same operational window: speed on one axis, mass on another. If AR-2 is engaging the SIL-2 at high altitude and the FOD-2 is arriving below the intercept window at Mach 15, the fire control system is not managing one threat, it is managing two fundamentally different threat physics, simultaneously with an interceptor stockpile that has been under continuous pressure since Wave 1. The targets selected for the Sejjil-2's debut were equally deliberate. The IRGC announced that the barrage targeted centers of administration and decision-making affecting Israeli air operations, military and defense-related infrastructure. Translated from the language of official statements into operational reality, this means one specific thing: the command and control nodes coordinating Israel's ongoing air campaign against Iran. Iran was not firing at Jerusalem as a symbolic gesture of defiance. It was firing at the architecture that directs the strikes being made against Iranian territory. The communications infrastructure, the command nodes, the decision-making layers from which Israeli air operations are planned, coordinated and executed. The Sejjil-2's first mission in this conflict was not destruction for its own sake. It was targeted decapitation of an air campaign. There is a number that has not yet been addressed in this analysis. Not the missile's weight, not its range, not its speed. The number is 1550. That is the scale difference between the warhead that struck a residential street in central Jerusalem on the 24th of March, gutting multiple floors of an apartment building, leaving residents shaking, describing the impact as right above us, and what the Sejjil-2 is capable of delivering to a target within 1,000 kilometers. That warhead carried approximately 100 kilograms of explosive content. The Sejjil-2 at maximum warhead configuration delivers 1.5 tons against a civilian structure. That difference is catastrophic against hardened military infrastructure, reinforced command bunkers, underground communications nodes, protected Air Force facilities. That difference is not simply greater destruction, it is a categorically different class of destruction. And then there's the capability that Western analytical sources have neither confirmed nor denied with any certainty, but which Iranian state media and IRGC sources have explicitly claimed: the Sejjil-2's potential MVY configuration, multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles, a single missile, multiple warheads, each warhead separated during the terminal phase, each warhead maneuvering independently toward a distinct target. The claim is technically plausible. The Sejjil-2's launch weight and second-stage architecture provide the physical basis for a MIRV payload. Whether this capability has been operationally demonstrated in the current conflict cannot be confirmed from available open-source reporting with certainty. Intellectual honesty requires that acknowledgement. But the implication of even a subset of deployed Sejjil-2 missiles carrying functional MIRV payloads fundamentally changes the interception mathematics. A single intercept event already demanding against a maneuvering re-entry vehicle descending through the atmosphere at hypersonic speeds must now simultaneously engage multiple independently maneuvering warheads diverging towards separate aim points. No current Israeli defense system was designed for that scenario. Arrow 2 engages exospherically. Arrow 3 operates at even higher altitude. Both depend on detection geometry. Both depend on radar coverage. And that radar coverage has been operating under continuous pressure across 5 weeks of sustained high-tempo missile operations. The Sejjil-2 does not merely stress the defense system against a MIRV configuration, it presents the defense system with a problem it was architecturally never built to solve. What makes the sustained deployment of the Sejjil-2 strategically significant is not any single wave, it is the pattern. Wave 54, the debut, Wave 79 deployed again. this time alongside Kabar, Shekchek and Emad missiles, successfully penetrating layered defense systems, striking intelligence facilities in northern and central Jerusalem, military and commercial infrastructure in Ramat Gan, and southern military logistics and command headquarters in Beersheba, northern Jerusalem, Ramat Gan, Beersheba, the full geographic length of the country simultaneously with the Sejjil-2, contributing its massive warhead specifically to targets selected for their command and control significance. And in waves after wave 79, it continues to appear. This is no longer a debut, this is no longer signal, this is a sustained operational commitment. The Sejjil-2 carries one additional distinction that the analytical record demands be noted. It is entirely Iranian in origin. Unlike most systems in the Iranian ballistic missile inventory, which carry varying degrees of design lineage traceable to North Korean, Russian, Chinese or Pakistani technology, the Sejjil bears no such resemblance. As former Israeli Ballistic Missile Defense Organization Director Uzi Rubin has observed, Iran built this system indigenously across 2 decades of development without external design templates. A nation that was supposed to have had its military capability destroyed so thoroughly it could never again threaten regional stability, just deployed for the first time in combat a domestically engineered super-heavy solid-fuel ballistic missile in its 54th retaliatory wave and kept deploying it. Each week of this conflict has introduced a new weapons category into the operational record: the FOD-2, the FOD-3 cluster hypersonic, the Nazala multi-warhead missile, the IRGC long-range drone, and now the Sejjil-2. The technological threshold is not holding. It is rising methodically, deliberately, and with no visible ceiling yet in sight. Wave 54 brought the Sejjil-2 to Jerusalem. The only question that remains on the table now is what Wave 100 brings.